Hi, everybody. We're here today with Joslyn, and we will be discussing the Chicago Defender and its role post slavery in the African American community in Chicago and beyond. So, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, Joslyn.
Wonderful. My name is Joslyn DiPasalegne, and I'm delighted to be here. I am the great niece of Robert Sengstacke Abbott, the founder of the Chicago Defender.
So, what's the story behind how it got started? Like, was there just a need? Was it his desire to tell a story? What's the story behind it?
Well, it's all of that. Mr. Abbott, as we love to call him, still went to work as a printer in the newspaper in town and learned the printing trade at Hampton. He also met Booker T. Washington, who was a professor there and a mentor, and they developed a similar. He developed a similar line of thinking as Booker T. Washington, is that teaching a trade is the best way to uplift the formerly enslaved. He graduated from Hampton in 1896 and then moved to Chicago because he couldn't get satisfactory satisfactory work as a printer. He
Mm-hmm.
decided to try law school. He was the only one in his class in 1899 when he graduated. Well, he didn't have much luck as an attorney either because of the color of his skin. People would
Right.
not hire him. Black folks wouldn't hire him because they didn't think, not that he didn't know the law, but because they wouldn't give him a fair chance in court. When he talked with his father, got a letter from his stepfather, who suggested to him that he start a newspaper.
Hmm. If you can't, if I guess if you can't beat them, join them,
That's
or if you can't join them, beat them.
If you can't join them, beat them. That's the one. That's the one. If you can't join them, beat them. So he set about creating this newspaper. After buying supplies and other things that he would need to start a newspaper, he had 25 cents.
Mm.
His landlord let him use her kitchen table to write his newspaper, and he wrote it in longhand because he didn't have any other tools. May 5th, 1905 was the day that he printed his first newspaper, and the Chicago Defender printed continuously throughout his life and up until it went digital a few years ago. In about 1910, he came up with a platform, and it was a 9-point platform. At the top of the platform, it said, "Racial segregation must cease. Racial segregation must cease."
Hmm.
He began a campaign to make sure that the African Americans were represented on the police departments, the fire department, the army, uh, in labor unions. He wanted African Americans to be represented everywhere in every walk of life
Hmm.
and treated fairly in every walk of life.
So this is stemming from that would be stemming from his time in college then, and kind of taking up the trades and using that to move the community forward.
Exactly, exactly. He used his legal mind, and he was a brilliant marketer. He understood how to market his publication. He started using bold headlines to attract people to his paper. He used red ink. Something else to consider: the Pullman Porters.
Mm.
He used the Pullman Porters and actors and actresses to get his newspaper uh, south of Chicago.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense because they were based here. So he would just give like print papers off, give them to the porters,
They
and
became agents. They became agents for the Chicago Defender.
mm,
Yes.
okay, distribution.
Distribution. Yes. Yes.
Can you kind of explain how the Great Migration kind of started?
Well, there was a lot going on in history at that time. People were leaving the South, but not in the numbers. There
Mm-hmm.
were that began after 1915, during from 1915 on.
Mm-hmm.
There was a boll weevil infestation in the South, and cotton was rotting on the vine,
Mm.
and so there was no work for sharecroppers, and so
Mm-hmm.
they were starving. Lynching was rampant in the South, and so people were trying to find another way of life. We were at the beginning of World War I,
Mm-hmm.
and white men were going off to war, and so there were jobs available in the North.
Mm.
Robert saw that opportunity and began to promote the idea of leaving the treacherous South for better opportunities in the North. That was the motivation behind the the Great Northern Drive, is what he called it in his newspaper. It August 15th, was it? No, it was April 15th,
Okay.
1915, was the day that Black people in the South were to go to the train stations, well, not the bus stations so much. I don't think we had bus stations, but any way they could, they were to leave the South and come to Chicago. He printed train schedules.
Mm.
He printed jobs. He printed rental housing opportunities in Chicago, so that people had a path forward. Uh, they knew where to go. They knew where they could get a job, so they weren't coming to some place where they had no idea how they would start.
So the last question that I have for you is, if you want people to remember the Chicago Defender, like how do you want them to remember it?
I want them to remember that the Chicago Defender is probably the oldest business in Chicago,
Hmm.
oldest Black business in Chicago. I want them to remember that the Chicago Defender was just that, a defender of the race. In fact, that's what Mr. Abbott said he wanted his paper to be, a defender of the race.
Hmm.
He wanted, when nobody else would step up, the Chicago Defender would step up. We encouraged people to leave the South. Uh, we've elected presidents. I want them to remember that Mr. Abbott was a pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
In 1921, he opened on Indiana between 34th and 35th Street. He moved into an old Jewish temple. He still couldn't hire Black printers because they couldn't join the union, so they couldn't be apprenticed. So he hired white printers, and he set up his own apprenticeship program.
Mm.
And under the white printers, the Black printers became apprenticed and were then able to join the union.
Mm.
So he was bold in his maneuverings. He wasn't shy about taking risks. and making big steps. And I think that's what I want people to remember about Mr. Abbott and about the Chicago Defender, that you've got to be bold. If something doesn't work, try something else. He tried being a printer. It didn't work. He tried being a lawyer. It didn't work. But he used those two experiences. He didn't see them as failures. He saw them as steps towards where he needed to go. And I think that's what I want people to understand about Mr. Abbott. He gave us a roadmap for how to succeed.
Um, I've learned so much. I've learned so much today, and I I really appreciate you having this conversation with me, and I hope that it kind of helps educate the masses in how important the Chicago Defender is, not only to African Americans in the city, but to the entire fabric of Chicago and the Midwest.
You can also comb, that's the word I'm looking for, comb the archives of the Chicago Defender. If you Google Chicago Defender archives,
Mm-hmm.
the pages of the Chicago Defender are a history book.
Mm.
They recorded what we were doing. And I think that's what we have to remember as well, that a newspaper's value goes beyond the current moment. It is a repository for history. The Chicago Defender recorded births and deaths,
Mm.
which was not done by the white newspapers.
Yeah,
It celebrated birthdays. It was our connection to each other. It gave us a sense of well-being.
that's a great note to end on.
Thank
That's a
you.
great note to end on. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.